Hi there, it's Christine with Ziedman Development, and today I want to walk you through using GiveGab and a standardized template that we've built in Importacular in order to import your Day of Giving gifts into the Razor's Edge. Now, a couple things I just want to point out as we get started. I recognize that you may or may not have used Importacular before, so if you have used Importacular before, some of this may be a bit of a review for you. But if you haven't, I just want to give you a brief introduction. We do make a free version of Importacular available to all users, and if you're Blackbud hosted, it's already on your plugins tab. All you have to do is create a ZZone account and activate it. If you are self-hosted, you still need to create a ZZone account. You'll need to download it and install it, and then you can activate it. We do have resources to help you do that. They're available in our user guide, and if you need any help with that, just send us an email and we're happy to help you get started. The other thing is the free version includes importing constituents, their contact information, things like constituent attributes, constituent notes, solicit codes, constituent codes, as well as gifts. Now, there are areas that may connect to your gifts that wouldn't include, things like adding a solicitor to your gifts or adding a tribute to your gifts. Those are not included in the free version. If you would like more information on those areas, absolutely please let us know. But what I'm going to walk through today is all going to be functionality within the free version. That's all that's added to this template. So we're making that assumption that that's what you're going to do. And if you'd like to add on to it, please let us know and we're happy to help. So I'm going to go ahead and open Importacular so we can take a quick look. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are working with a template that's based off of a file. So I have a sample data file that's come from GiveGab, and we are going to link to that by clicking on File, and then we're going to click on Start, and that's going to let me find that file. So I'm going to click on my binoculars here, and I'm going to click on my Giving Day example, and I'm going to load that CSV. We're going to click Retrieve Data, and that's just going to pull our data into Importacular, and we can now see how many records we have for review, and we can either create a new template, or today we're actually going to have you walk through working with an existing template. Now, I already have this template in my drop down. It's my GiveGab Day of Giving. But before I take a look and show you that template, I want to show you one more thing. If you're importing that template, you're going to click on Template, click on Import, and then you're going to import that file. It's an XML file. You're going to import that, and that's going to add it into Importacular. Now, you may have to close this screen and reopen it in order to access that template. Sometimes it needs a bit of a refresh, but we're going to go from here and we're going to take a look at that template. So I'm going to click on GiveGab Day of Giving, and I'm going to click on the pencil so we can edit it. Just a side note, I strongly encourage you need to open this and edit it before you do an import, because you need to make sure that the settings I've added are going to work for you. The other thing that you're going to have to do is you have to add your campaign fund and appeal. You have to add any of those kinds of codes that are unique to your organization. I obviously can't have everybody's funds in my system, so those won't be set up until you add them here. So we're going to click on that pencil, and I'm just going to show you a few of the things that I have added. I did get started with mapping a constituent, and I do want to point out that I've done a bit of a basic mapping here. So I'm going to move that up so you can see. So I've got my first name field set here. I've set that first name to only be assigned when the last name isn't blank, and I've made it proper case. I'm also going to uncheck that existing box. I don't want to change first names on existing records. Now, I do want to mention this to say that the reason that last name is not blank is on there is because the first name field also doubles as the organization name field in the sample data that I had. So this is set up this way so that we can track who is an organization and who is an individual. If we come down a little bit further, just so you can see, I'm working with that last name field as my indicator for the key indicator. So if it's blank, I'm saying it's an organization. If it's not blank, it's an individual. I've also got that last name field set up so that it's going to become proper case, and I've added some data transformations to help with last names that have an additional capital letter. So like MCM, that's making sure that'll come through correctly. Also set this not to update existing constituents. I'm going to scroll down just a bit so you can see what we've done with the organization name. So again, I mapped that to the first name because that field is doing double duty. I do want to make sure that's set at proper case. And again, I didn't want to update existing. So just in case people are typing things in a little differently than what's in Razor's Edge, I don't want to change it. I did add a couple of addressee formulas here, and I recognize that those may or may not be what you want. So if you are using addressees and salutations, you may want to change these, use this drop down so you can select the formula that meets your standard. Yours may not have the same thing, so just double check those addressee and salutation fields. I've also added a generic constituent code of friend, and I did not add a date from. So if you work with date to and date from, you may need to add that if you work with something that indicates when they came in the system. And the other thing I do want to mention is if you only want to add that to existing constituents who don't have a code, you can always add that function here. So just a couple pieces that you can work with. You can add any of these other fields on the side if you want to add a constituent attribute. So if you want to track that these are new constituents that came out of the giving day, you can easily do that. You just need to know what your attribute category is. So maybe that's a source. And then maybe the source is giving day, whatever you want to call that. And then when you make that mapping, you do need to go ahead and give it a name. Oops, I can't spell. There we go. And maybe I do want to give that the date so we know. And then if I only want that to be added to new constituents, I am going to want to go ahead and uncheck that existing and say only added if it's new. So that may be something that you want to add if you're working with the source attribute. I'm going to go ahead and leave those alone just to show you a couple of our other areas. So we have our addresses. I've got a pretty simple mapping here for the address. I've got the street address. I've got the city. I did include the country. I am defaulting these to be preferred addresses. If that's not something you want, you would want to change that. I've got the state. I did a type based off of the last name so that if the last name is blank, it's a business. If the last name is not blank, it's home. So trying to help avoid putting a home address on a business address. But if that doesn't work for you, you'll definitely want to change that, make it what you need it to be. I've also defaulted the send mail to have a checkbox. The other thing that I've set up here is I have enabled some address settings. So just so you know, it does look to see if the address is already in Razor's Edge. So I've set it to say if it's already in Razor's Edge, don't change it, because I'm assuming if you're running NCOA CAS, you don't want to change with what people typed in. It's matching on address line 1, address line equivalents, which means street versus ST, boulevard versus BLVD, and the zip code. If it doesn't match and it adds a new address, I've set it to back up the previous preferred address. And then I've added an end date and I've checked the box to remove send mail. You do need to make sure if you keep these settings that you have an address type that works here. So I set it to former address. That may not be an address type in your template or in your Razor's Edge. So if it's not, you need to change that. The other thing is I've got an email address set up here. So I mapped the actual email address to the phone number. You need to check your phone type and make sure you have a phone type here that is a possibility in your Razor's Edge. And then my area settings for my email address, I am telling it not to add a new phone number when there's a match on the number, not the type. And then I also set it up with a hierarchy here. So you do need to check that hierarchy and make sure you put all of the email address possibilities of phone types at the top. So if you don't know, if you need a bit more information about that, you're going to want to look at the phone area settings in our user guide, and that will help you do that. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then I want to take a quick look at the gifts. So right now I've just mapped to the one-time gifts. Another piece I do want to mention to you about the gifts is that in the sample file, we have a lot of different pieces that I recognize you may not want to put into Razor's Edge. So for example, some of these gifts are offline. And if your offline gifts are already in Razor's Edge, you don't want to import those. So you could easily remove them from your file. That's going to be the best way to make sure you don't add them a second time. So definitely take a look at that. The other thing I want to mention is that I am working with the amount charged as the gift amount. because that's my best practice. If you want a different amount, you do need to change that and make sure that you add the field that you want to be the gift amount. But I just did want to point out that offline, definitely something you need to pay attention to in that gift mapping. So I'm going to open my gift mapping since we just talked about it a little bit. I think that'll help make that a little bit easier. As I mentioned, I used the amount charged. I did work with the anonymous so that if they say no, the anonymous stays blank. If it says anonymous to public, it's going to check the box and mark the gift as anonymous. I've added the donation date to the date. I have set a generic fund, and obviously this is not going to be your fund, so you definitely need to add your fund. You definitely need to work with campaign and appeal if those are things that you're using. I've added my donation date as the post date, but if you wanted to change that to the date of a deposit, you'll just need to make a change. And you can always do that by adding a default here instead of the source. So you would just remove that source field and add a default. I added the pay method of other. If you wanted to, you could change that to credit card. You could leave it on cash. Any of those that works for you. And I made my receipt amount the amount charged. I added any donor messages to the reference field. And I also have the type set up as cash. So those are those Razor's Edge gift types. So these should be cash for most people because they're donations. If you wanted to track them as something such as other, you could do that as well. Obviously use your best data standards. At this point, you can add some gift attributes. We do have the option here as well for gift notepads. Those areas. Some of these other areas though will be grayed out for you if you don't have access to the full package within Importacular. So soft credits do require purchase, as well as solicitor and tribute, some of those areas. So I'm going to go ahead and save and close this template. Once you have your template tweaked and ready to go, you're just going to open this up. You're going to create a control report. I definitely recommend you create a new control report every time. So we're just going to say control giving day, and then if you wanted to add a date, you can. Keep it as an Excel file. Don't change that file type. Click save, and then you can either work with just a few of the gifts if you just want to review it. You can create a Razor's Edge query. Either of those are options available to you, but you're going to click continue, and that's going to match the data in your file to data in Razor's Edge. Now, if you need more information about how it matches, let us know. I'll send you the documentation so you can look into that. It works with things such as the email address, the mailing address, and the names. You can see here I've got my records set up. I can look at the grid. I can see what it's looking like, what's going into Razor's Edge. I can see if some of them are linked together. So Amy Irwin made more than one gift. So we're going to create her constituent account once. We're going to update it the next time. So if somebody made multiple gifts to your organization, they're not going to get multiple accounts if they've matched to each other. That action to take, create, is going to create a new record in Razor's Edge. Update is going to update an existing record, whether it's in this grid or whether it's in Razor's Edge. If you see people that you believe are in your database, you can click on Find Match Constituent, use Find in Razor's Edge, and you can link them. You can look over all of the mappings and see everything that's going into Razor's Edge just by clicking on these different tabs. And once you're ready, you can click to validate just to make sure it's all lined up and all your code tables work, and make sure everything's going to go in as expected. This is validating perfectly. I can see pencils and green check marks. That's exactly what I'm going to want to see if I'm doing an import. Once I've validated and I don't have exceptions, which is what this is telling me, I can close that, uncheck validate, and I can import this. And it's going to import these gifts into a batch. That way I can review my batch before committing it, and I've got everything in Razor's Edge. I know this was a crash course. This was actually not intended to teach you everything about Importacular, but just to kind of walk you through the settings that we have here. I definitely encourage you to watch some of our tutorials that will teach you how to build a template that will answer any of those questions. I strongly encourage you to take a look at our user guide, and I hope that this template, this video and the template together will help you get those Day of Giving gifts into the Razor's Edge using Importacular. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great day.